Hey, Nat, welcome to the Leaders Lab. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Ken. I'm excited to chat.
I know I can't wait to hear more about this story that I've read now. But maybe if you could give us a backdrop. I know you're in Austin now. Is that where you grew up, or where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm from the DC area originally. I grew up in Northern Virginia, like 15 minutes from the district, and have lived a number of places. I grew up there. My parents were still there. I went to high school in Connecticut, college in Pittsburgh, and then first came to Austin in 2015. And I mean, it's only 9 years ago, but it was a very different city back then. I was like the weirdo graduating from college and going to Austin because nobody else was.
Right.
But was here for a year, started doing some marketing work then, did the digital nomad thing for a couple of years, and then came back to Austin with my now wife. And from 2015 to 2020, I guess really 2014 to 2020, I'd been in this internet entrepreneur, writer, creator world. And it had been this pretty like volatile, exploratory, entrepreneurial phase. I definitely had some big wins during that period. I had some courses that did well. I started a marketing agency, and also a lot of things that just didn't go well or that lost a bunch of money on. And so it was this very like up and down career. And I was running this marketing agency from 2017 up until 2020. At the start of 2020, I was getting kind of burned out on it, getting a little bit tired of doing it. And so had talked to the COO about her taking over, me stepping out. And we had this great plan in place in February of 2020. And then, March hits and all the COVID stuff starts, and we lost half of our business in the span of like 2 weeks or something. And so now suddenly that's cash flow negative, which is an awful place to be in as an agency because you don't,
Sure.
usually have tons of cash that you're sitting on. So spent the rest of the year getting that back together, working with her and trying to like save the business and then get it to the point where I can actually step out and try to find what I want to work on next. And that got us to like December 2020. I stepped out. She took it over. I wasn't taking a salary or an owner's draw or anything. It was just paying my health insurance. And so I basically had my health insurance covered. And then I was like,
Nice.
okay, what do I do now? Right? Like what do I actually focus on? Because this cycle I've been in of starting something, getting super into it, it going okay, and then getting bored and quitting and moving on to the next thing, like that's not serving me anymore. I can't keep doing that. My wife and I were trying to have our first kid. And so I said, I've always really been interested in programming. I'm going to start actually trying to learn how to program. I want to write, but I don't think I can make the money work there. So I'm going to do some programming. And then as I got a month or two into programming, the crypto boom of 2021 started, and I started seeing all of these dollar signs on my friends' social media accounts and hearing rumors of how much money people were making, so quickly. And started to think, if these other people are doing that well over here, maybe I can put this serious career stuff on hold for a year or two and just go all in on crypto and see if I can make it work for me too.
Right. Right. Well, and I think with your background, I mean, you've got this combination of kind of entrepreneurial. You're learning how to be a programmer. Sound pretty tech savvy at that point. So yeah, it seems like kind of a fit. In the book, what I love is it's super relatable when you read it. I mean, I think for a lot of us, I mean, I'm somebody that likes investing, but crypto's always been, I don't know, it's like this foreign, weird
Weird.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't get it. Like when I buy a stock, I'm like betting on the company's growth and earnings. And I know there's only so many Bitcoins out there, but what does it mean if you can't, like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Totally.
And so
Totally.
I just kind of steered clear of it. But the way you talk about it and how you got in is in such relatable terms. I feel like, when you were talking about meeting up with your friends and buying that initial coin, those initial coins. And did you say it Doge? I don't even know. I mean, I know what it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
and I know the ticker.
Do- yeah. Doge was kind of where it started because as I was trying to figure out programming, the crypto market was taking off and Elon Musk was talking about Doge and Doge was in
Yeah.
the news and Doge had gone from less than a cent to 50 cents or something in the span of 2 months, right?
Right.
So if you had bought in a couple of months ago, you were up 50x in two
Right.
months, right? So it doesn't take a huge initial investment to see some crazy returns. And so everyone, I'm day trading Doge with my friend, and then I talk to somebody who's way more experienced in crypto, and she's saying like, look, you've missed the boat on Doge. It's you're too late to that party, but there are a lot of other parties coming, and if you can figure out how to get in on those, then things might work out for you. And that was kind of where it went from, okay, I'm dabbling in the way that kind of everybody else is right now, to let's try to really figure out what's going on here, go all in and see if I can be the person who's, buying something like Doge 3 months ago before everybody else knows about it.
Right. Have you always been, uh, super like I don't want to say risk oriented, but I guess you've got to be okay with a high degree of uncertainty when you're getting into these things, and especially when you're letting your money ride. I'm probably more
Yeah,
like your wife, at least the way you describe her in the book. Like, hey, can we just like, hey, we made
responsible,
our
sane.
investment. Well, I don't know. Sometimes to me, it's like, hey, 20% in a day, that's great. But like, and then in
Yeah.
this world, you are talking about things like 5,000%, right? I mean, it's stuff like that sometimes. So, was that always in your nature, or was it something that you just had to discover to be successful in this world?
That's a great question. I think that my career had been weird up to that point, where I had months where I had launched products or done something and made, some huge windfall really quickly, and then had long periods of making nothing or
Hmm.
just like slowly spending that money down. And, I'd been in multiple situations in my career where, I was just seeing my bank account kind of like slowly go down, and then I'd figure something out and it would like take off again. And so I was comfortable with that, with with not being like slow and steady
Yeah.
growth and looking for like those quick wins. But I think it did serve me for having success in crypto. But through the course of the book and writing it and finishing it, it also made me realize how much that attitude was kind of like harming me professionally or just harming me life wise, because something that you see a lot, especially in crypto world, is what gets you here often doesn't get you further. It takes you all the way back to start and maybe even below that. And so
Right.
being in that mindset you just described of being totally comfortable leaving money on the table, doubling down, aiming for, rich or wreck, moon or bust, uh, it was something I kind of had to learn, try to start working out of my system, because it it's great when it's working, and then you miss one of those returns to grace and you end up in a lot of trouble really quickly.
Yeah.
So yes, it's definitely part of my personality, and I think something that I really realized in the last couple of years I needed to work on.
Maybe need to bring some more stability in there. If not for yourself, then even for the people around you, I would think. Yeah.
Totally, totally. I mean, that having that mentality is fine, I think, when you're a 24-year-old living in Argentina making 2 grand a month and have no expenses or obligations or anything like I
Right.
was at one point. But when you're married with a kid and a mortgage and you've got to start thinking about the next 20, 30 years of your career, you might need to reorient
Right.
slightly.
Right. So as you're doing Dogecoin, and then you get that mentor that kind of talks to you about like, hey, maybe that's not the thing.
Yeah.
At that point, your wife is pregnant, right? When you first started
Yeah.
trading it, and then
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
So she's pregnant. You sell out of Dogecoin. What happens next, both personally and professionally, from there?
Yeah, so we started trying to have a kid in January, and we both figured it was going to take a while, right? Because I'm sure friends too who are trying to have kids, and it often takes longer than you expect it to, right? And she was starting a new career as well, so neither of us were making very much money at the time. And so we said, okay, we've got a while, and then we'll have the whole 9 months of pregnancy, and then so we have plenty of time to figure this out. And then she gets pregnant like the first month. And so, which is amazing, right? Like it's a huge blessing. And we both suddenly go like, holy shit, we got to figure this out right now. And that was what kind of lit more of that fire under my ass in that period of like, okay, if I need to make, call it 150K this year, day trading Doge isn't it. If I'm going to do something in crypto, I've got to figure out what's a more reliable way to like make money or like get lucky more consistently, whatever it is. And so I talked to this friend who became a mentor in this early part of the process, Quinn, and she was saying like, look, if you're just speculating, if you're just buying the new tokens that are launching that you're hearing about in the news, you have high upside, but you also have pretty high downside because by the time you're hearing about it on Twitter or on SNL, you're really late. You're like the exit liquidity. You're
Right.
the dumb money that's coming in at the end so that the people who got in early can sell at a high price and go on to the next thing. And once I realized that, it was this question of, okay, well, what is the smarter money doing? And there was this game in crypto at the time called, form of speculation and kind of a game called farming, where farming is still a thing, not like it was back then. It was really a manic phase at that point, but where a new project would launch, and in order to incentivize people to come try their new project, they would give some of their tokens away as long as you were using their product. So the
Mhm.
example I use in the book is imagine if every time you posted a photo to Instagram, Facebook gave you some Meta stock, right? Cool way to get you to come try Instagram, right? And you can imagine that somebody launches a competitor to Instagram and they say, well, okay, we're not as valuable as Meta, but if you post to our new like Instagram 2, we'll give you 10 shares. Right. And
Right.
now suddenly everybody goes to that one. And then another one launches and they say, we'll give you 100 shares. And everybody goes to that one. Right. So people just kept upping the ante and how many tokens they were giving away. But then, you have this natural question of like, well, why would anybody want to buy those tokens, right? Why would there be a market for them? And the answer was that for a lot of these platforms, if you didn't sell your tokens and you redeposited them in the platform, so say instead of selling your Meta stock, you invest it back into Instagram, right? Like you
Mhm.
you store it in your Instagram account. Now they give you more tokens. So you're sort of compounding your earnings by letting them ride. And it turned into this game of how long can we let our tokens ride so that the value of all of them goes up before big players start pulling their money and selling.
Yeah,
And
because they
people would,
get. Oh, sorry. Because
no,
of
go ahead.
the way I understand it, then would be unless there's essentially like a run on the bank, a run on the token,
Yeah,
it will go up in value until the amount of tokens getting pulled out is much greater than the amount going in, right?
exactly. Because people are buying them to deposit them to earn more of them.
Right.
So they're saying, okay, well, if I put in 100 tokens, I'll make 200 tokens today. But then instead of selling those 200, I'll redeposit them. Now I have 300, so I'll make 600 tomorrow. But if I go to the market and I buy 1,000 tokens, I can make 2,000 tomorrow. And so people are looking at it that way. But everybody knows, well, the people who are playing it very seriously know this is going to collapse at some
Of
point.
course. Yeah.
And so you have to try to guess like, okay, or where are we in this peak? Are we near the top and I should get out now, or is this going way higher? And the very first farm that she got me into, I made like a couple $100 in a few hours. And then I woke up the next morning and realized I would have made about $1,000 if I had left it in overnight. Right. So it was a double curse. One, the curse was making really quick and easy money right away. And the second curse was realizing that if I had played the game more aggressively, I would have made even more money.
But
And it's a
but but because of the nature of crypto, or not crypto, but because of the nature of like these coins, they're traded 24/7. Yeah. So
yeah.
so I mean, isn't it scary to go to sleep? I mean,
Oh yeah, it's super
because
scary. I mean, there's a period that I only hinted at in the book, but actually lasted for a couple of months where all of us were waking up throughout the night. We would set alarms for every 3 or 4 hours so we
yeah.
could wake up and check if the token was dropping at all so we could get out, or so that we could claim what we had earned and redeposit it to accelerate our compounding returns a little bit, which you're extremely anxious about price charts moving, right?
Right.
And then you add not sleeping properly on top of it, and you end up in this kind of like manic fugue state for just months. And it's bad because you're making money doing it. So
Right.
it feels like it's worth it while you're slowly just chipping away at your
Right.
sanity.
It's almost like someone, yeah, it's someone going to a job going, I'm doing what I need to do for my family, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
putting in the time, I'm putting in the hours. Like it's no different than rolling up your sleeves, swinging a hammer or something, right?
When you're making good money, you can convince yourself of a lot. It
Yeah.
was definitely one of the big lessons.
Where did it go from there?
So farming was great for a little while. And then we put money into one project that seemed fine, seemed safe, and it turned out to be what's called a rug, right? A scam where they made a small tweak to the code that none of us noticed that let them steal basically everyone's money. So some of the people who I had been in this with from the beginning were up tens of thousands of dollars and then just lost all of it on this one play. And I got really, really lucky because I had put my money in there, but the way they did the scam is they said, "Hey, we figured out how to optimize your earnings. If you authorize this boost on your earnings, then you'll make like 50% more and everybody wins, right?" So everybody just yeah, boom, hit boost. But it was a two-step thing. You had to like agree to it and then finalize it. I agreed to it, but I never finalized it. So I never gave them the final permission they needed to take all of my money. So all of my friends, almost all of my friends got wiped out by this or like significantly set back by it. And then I still had my money and I was basically the only one who got out unscathed,
Wow.
which, yeah. And so that was, I mean, terrifying because literally this happened while we were out like playing pickleball. We realized something's going wrong. And so we're sprinting back to the house to like get our laptops to try to get our money out. And the other guys didn't. I managed to. And so we said, like, okay, it felt like we were making easy money, but we were, the analogy is like picking up pennies in front of the steamroller the whole time. We were making 10%, 20%, whatever a day, but it's like black swan, right? You can
Yeah.
keep going, and then Thanksgiving hits and you just boom, right? Back down to zero, back to lower than where you were at the beginning. And so it was kind of like with Doge, with the speculating on shit coins. Like you it can go great, but then one bad mistake can set you all the way back if you're leaving too much on the table.
Yeah.
So we all basically said like, okay, we're done with this farming game. And for me, it was this affirmation that and I think this is a good lesson in general. Like speculating it's such a risky way to make money. It's such a hard way to make money. But if you can work on things, if you can build things, then your downside is really capped, right? Because you might not make very much off of like building something, but as long as you don't overinvest in creating it, you're not going to suddenly get wiped out
Hmm.
either. And so that's when I said, okay, I'm going back to programming. I'm gonna really, really focus on learning programming again, but I'm gonna learn crypto programming so I can actually work with a crypto company, get paid in their token. Hopefully their token takes off, and then I can maybe make money that way instead of effectively gambling.
Almost this balance between a normal life and a crypto life. Like still keep
Yeah,
a
exactly.
foot in the pool for the upside, but also have maybe a salary or some kind of consistency. Yeah.
And that's what I tell to people now too, who are interested in getting into crypto, is I'll usually say like just don't even bother with the speculation game, don't bother with the meme coin game. Put $1,000 or whatever on a wallet so you can scratch the itch and goof around, but don't put serious money or attention into it. Find a company you're excited about that's building something cool and try to work with them or try to learn how to do one of the skills that is valuable in this space. Because if you pick the right crypto company to work with, and if crypto comes back in a year, 2 years, 3 years, like a lot of us believe it will, and you're with one of those companies and you're getting some of their tokens, that could be extremely lucrative. Like
Sure.
that's completely true. And again, your downside is a little bit capped because you're not risking your savings on, you know, Doge Elon Mars or whatever the new meme coin of
Right.
the day is.
Right. So so how are things going at that point? I'm going to sidetrack a little bit.
Mhm.
By this time, when you decide to get into programming, but in the crypto space, has your daughter been born yet? And or is it getting close? Like, where
Yeah,
are
so
you
not
in
yet.
life?
So
Okay.
the a lot of the Dogecoin speculation, whatnot, actually started in January, February. The book picks up in late April, early May. And then I start getting more seriously into programming at the end of May.
Okay.
So and my daughter wasn't born until October. So I still have 5 months or so.
Yeah.
And the part of what motivated me to get into programming for crypto and to try to learn it really, really quickly was that because there were so many of these tokens and NFTs and crypto projects launching just left and right nonstop, the demand for people who could write crypto code, Solidity, was just through the roof.
Right.
I've never seen a job market like it. You would go into the Discords, the chat groups for a lot of these projects, and they would have hiring roles listed, and they would say hiring a Solidity dev, 250K base salary plus tokens, minimal experience necessary, basically, because Solidity had only existed as a programming language for a few years at that point, and a lot of the stuff that people were building with Solidity had only existed for a year or two. So it's not like you could have 5 years of
Yeah.
experience. If you had 3 or 4 months of experience and you deployed some code, you were in the top 10,000 Solidity developers in the world. There just weren't many of them.
Yeah.
And so that was a real motivation, like, oh man, if I can go learn this skill set, that's going to be insanely valuable. And you're going to be turning down jobs, even if you're still effectively a beginner compared to if you tried to learn, say JavaScript or something where
Right.
there's much more of an established job market for it.
And so where does this programming in the crypto world take you?
Yeah, so the first challenge was just how the hell do you learn this thing?
Yeah.
Because again, take JavaScript. There are millions of online courses, boot camps, mentors, everything who you can go to try to learn. If you run into a problem, you can go to Stack Overflow and you can find your answer. I mean, now we have GPT, right? And you can just boom, writes the code for you. But back then, there was like one crummy Solidity course on Udemy. There were no boot camps, there were no mentors, there were almost no like Stack Overflow resources to help you out. So you were very on your own. And I started hacking at it anyway, started going through that old course, started trying to build stuff. And the first surprise was that it was easier than I expected. It's kind of like a limited language. There's not tons of libraries or tons of additions. It's like very simple, very clear, very straightforward. And a lot of the common crypto code, like launching a token, launching an NFT, actually doesn't require very much coding. You need to understand how it works, but it's a relatively simple process to do.
Okay.
So once you understand kind of how the things pipe together. But the big scary thing about writing Solidity and writing crypto code is that if you deploy your code to the blockchain in what's called a smart contract, uh, that code can't be changed once it's deployed.
Okay.
So if I write some code that says, I'm going to make a Leaders Lab token,
Hmm.
and I'm going to send I'm going to make 1 million tokens, and they're all going to go to Ken, and like here's the smart contract for the token, and now it's just living on the Ethereum blockchain forever. If I made a mistake that allowed somebody else to go to the smart contract and create another 1 million tokens and send them to myself, and send them to like me or themselves or whoever, there'd be nothing I could do. It would just it would just be there. The bug would just be there. You couldn't fix it. You could make a new token, you could relaunch it, but if people have already put millions of dollars into this thing,
Right.
that money's gone.
Right.
It's unrescuable. So Solidity is really scary in that way. If you make a website and you deploy it and there's a typo, you just fix it
Yeah.
and redeploy it. It's no big deal. Um, and Solidity was the opposite. So I wrote my first contract, and I deployed it, and I was super super excited about it, and then I put the code for it up on GitHub so that I could like send it to these crypto companies and say, "Hey, look, like I made a smart contract. I know what I'm doing. You should hire me." And go out to dinner with my wife to celebrate. She's really happy for me. I'm super happy. I come home and realize that like my wallet is partially empty, my crypto wallet where all my crypto should be. Some of the money is missing. And at first I think, oh, okay, I made a mistake when I launched the contract. I spent too much ETH
Oh,
launching it. I
got
spent too
you.
much.
Got you.
Like you
Okay.
could have made an error where instead of spending $100 deploying it, you spent $1,000.
Yeah,
Like,
no different than right now if you have Chat GPT plugged into an
yeah,
API and you're like, whoops, that did more than
exactly.
I thought it was going to do. Yeah, yeah.
You use too many tokens, you
Yeah.
leave your AWS instance on overnight, and you run up a big Amazon bill. Like those
Yeah.
mistakes happen, right? That's normal. And so I'm like, okay, cool. That's probably what happened. I go into my transaction history to look at the deployment and see where the error was. And then I'm looking at my transactions, and there are all of these other transactions that I didn't do. And so I'm looking at what should be my wallet, my bank account, what should be my history of things that I've done with it. And then there are all of these things that someone else has done, which is just blood runs cold, heartbeat in your ears, like awful, terrifying situation. And I start desperately trying to fight this person who's in my wallet to save what's left of my money there. And they're just way better at it than I am. They know how to write code or whatever to control my wallet better than I do. And I basically just have to sit there and watch as they take.
When you say
Mhm.
fight them, you mean you're running code or whatever, like trying to block them, and they're getting around you essentially, right?
Exactly. Like I
Okay.
still had some money in the wallet.
Right.
And so I'm trying to send it to a different wallet that they don't control. But every time I try to send the money out,
They're
the
blocking it.
transaction gets rejected
Yeah.
because they've removed all of the ETH in my wallet that I would need to execute a transaction. So I can't pay for transactions. And then what they're doing is within one probably command on their computer, they're sending in a tiny bit of ETH, sending themselves the money that I was trying to rescue, and then draining what was left of the ETH for the transaction fee. So there's no way for me to get money in to get my money out. And I tried sending in money. I had my friend send a little bit of ETH in so we could get the money out. And the minute she sends it in, they
They
drain
took it.
that too.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's no escape from it. And so I have to watch as they take this like 35 grand out of my wallet. Uh, and the only reason I end up having any money left over is that I was using the same wallet on a different blockchain called Polygon. And they theoretically could have gone there and taken all of that money too, but they must not have realized that the wallet had funds on multiple blockchains. So they didn't notice it was there. And so I went to the other blockchain, was able to save like that bit of money, but the rest of it was just gone.
And they got there through that code that you had written and put on GitHub.
Yeah, so the smart contract that I deployed and was celebrating was actually fine. I actually did a good job with it. It was solid. The problem was when I put my code on GitHub to show how I had made it, I had included the seed phrase, the private key that let me use my wallet to deploy the contract. I had accidentally included that when I deployed all of the code to GitHub. So what's most likely going on is that there are people who have bots, they have scrapers that look for any new GitHub repositories that are written in Solidity code, that are written in crypto code, and they scan those repos for any variable called private key or seed phrase or anything
It's
like that.
crazy.
And I literally called it private key, right? Like, I couldn't have made it easier for these guys. And it was just right there public for anyone to take. And
Right.
so all they had to do was copy that variable,
And they're in
put
your
it
account.
into exactly, and drain my
Yeah.
account. It was the easiest hack in the world.
Yeah.
And I just hadn't noticed that I had put it up publicly. I thought that I had, there's a thing you can do in GitHub called git ignore, where a file on your computer doesn't get sent to GitHub, so it doesn't get published. I thought I had my private key in my git ignore file so that it wouldn't get published, and I just didn't double check. Like I was just being careless.
Well, and you're also like weeks into learning this at that time, not even
I,
months, right?
3 days.
Oh, Jesus. That's
Like,
rough. I mean,
yeah.
the highs and lows are just crazy
Yeah.
already. And so what happens? Does someone hire you then from the GitHub post, or like where do you go from there?
No, so, I obviously I was feeling pretty sorry for myself, pretty demotivated at this point because it was within the span of less than 2 weeks that I saw all of my friends lose all of that money to farming. I decided to commit to programming. I started programming and then I lost, all of this money.
Right.
And it was just, brutal. It was like, okay, this was dumb. I shouldn't have gotten into this. I don't know what I was thinking. I need to go figure
When you
something
say
else
this,
out.
you mean the whole world of crypto at
I
that
mean,
point?
crypto in general.
Yeah.
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 It's like trying to get rich quick off of farming and
Yeah.
speculating. That was
Yeah.
dumb. Trying to program, that was dumb. Like this was a mistake. And I wrote a Twitter thread basically saying like this was the mistake I made, right? Learning Solidity is hard and scary. I'm sure other people are going to try to do it. Like, don't make the same mistake I did. And I detailed exactly what happened. And it kind of went viral in the crypto sphere. And the reason it went viral was all of these other developers, a lot of them working at big companies like Coinbase and whatnot, were retweeting it saying they had made the same mistake or a
Hmm.
very similar mistake when they got started. And then I started getting all these DMs and these messages on Discord and things from people saying like, "Hey, I know this really sucks, but you got to keep going.
Right.
Like don't quit. Like you've just learned the hardest lesson. You're going to take your security a lot more seriously now. We've all gone through this. Don't give up now because we do actually need more people writing Solidity code, which was this kind of like beautiful side of the industry that I hadn't seen as much. Crypto can be very adversarial. It can
Right.
be very sharky. You're speculating, and so you're trying to get rich at somebody else's expense. There's definitely that side of it, but there was also this, and there still is this amazing community of engineers who are really excited about the technology and are really excited about somebody else being excited about the technology, who were just flooding me with support, saying like, keep going.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the kick that I needed to say like, okay, let's give it one more try.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned my lesson now. I feel like I won't be as stupid this time. I respect the risk that I'm taking more, and let's give it another go.
Yeah.
And then that's when things really started to take off.
Yeah, because is that how you started to form? Like, I know you had a newsletter with like tens of thousands of people. I'm guessing it was that initial swell from that Twitter post.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this was a part that I didn't get to talk about in the book as much. I had it in an early draft and I just had to cut it because it was boring. But I started writing these blog posts, one about what I was doing in crypto, and two, trying to explain the confusing parts of the industry to lay people. And something I realized through the process was that I was never the best engineer in crypto. I never understood the tech the best. I mean, probably not even top 10, 20% or whatever. But I did, and I've always had a bit of a gift for taking these complicated technical things and explaining them in writing in a way that's approachable and understandable and interesting to lay people. And so I was writing these blog posts talking about it, and that was how I started to get to know some of these other teams and these people who are working in crypto, and eventually how I got the gig with the gaming company where I was writing their token and writing a lot of their crypto code for them.
How quickly did the stakes go up? Because I know that all of a sudden, I mean, you get drained to 35,000 bucks. And what's weird about your whole, not weird, but like hard to wrap my head around sometimes with your whole story is in the last 3 years, everything we're talking about happened, and you've written a book to tell about it. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not. I mean, this is like a career or a lifetime worth of experience that you've had in probably a couple of years back then. Um, and it escalates. It seems like quickly, where all of a sudden getting drained of $35,000 probably doesn't seem like. I mean,
Yeah. Doesn't feel like anything
yeah,
pretty
you all of a
quickly. I
sudden go
mean,
from I made, a few $100 in my Dogecoin account, woo, big win, big adrenaline rush, to ups and downs with that, to oh my God, I lost $35,000. And pretty soon you're dealing with like millions, right? Like
yeah,
how
yeah.
quickly does it escalate?
Yeah, I mean, we should give the listeners the punchline, which is, at the peak of the mania, my paper crypto net worth is like north of $10 million. And
Whoa.
the game that I'm working on, like all of their tokens, combined at the market price were worth over $1 billion, right? And they're just absurd numbers, right? And I didn't actually make really anywhere close to that amount, right? It's all this, and we'll leave that for the book.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there's that point in, I think June was when the hack happened and I lost that money. And I said like, okay, I'm going to actually try to figure out the crypto programming and like, try to work with the game, whatever. And then by December, I'm literally making tens of thousands of dollars a day. And so, like you said, it's this lifetime of experience almost. I mean, the events of the book happened in just over a year, right? It was such a crazy time period. And it does go relatively quickly from wow, I'm super excited to make a few $100s to watching the crypto net worth go up and down by over $1 million a day.
That's insane.
Which, yeah, it screws with your head in a whole different way. But after I decided to really get serious about the programming, it was within a few weeks that I got in touch with that game. And they said, hey, can you help us build and launch this token? And at first I said, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. It's too risky. I don't think I'm experienced enough. And then I went and I tried to do it just to see if I could. And realized within a couple of days that it was a lot easier than I thought it was. And I kind of been through that gauntlet at that point where I like understood the risks better, understood the security and everything better, and felt confident enough to say like, hey, yeah, I can actually do this for you guys. And then you'll have the token for your game, and you can, that can be a good way for you to fund it and build it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
So were you gonna did you take that on like an assignment, like you're gonna pay me X amount of dollars, or you're gonna bring me on as employee, or you're gonna give me a bunch of coins, or like what did that look like?
Yeah, yeah. It's tough because in crypto, when people are launching new projects all the time like this, most of them are never worth anything, right?
Right.
They don't go anywhere. They go to zero. And so I didn't want to really get paid in their token because I still wasn't making money really at this point. I had launched a course to try to explain some crypto stuff. And so I was making some money off of that. And that had been a little bit of a boon, but I was still pretty stressed about money. And so I wanted them to just pay me in ETH. I wanted to pay me in Ethereum because I could at least change that to dollars, and I'd have that. And what became pretty clear was that they just didn't have any money. They were doing it as lean as possible. And so I said, okay, you know what, you can just pay me in your token. That's fine. I'll take 1% of the supply. They actually offered me 2%, and I said that's too much, right? You guys need that. And they said, okay, yeah, we'll give you 1% over the course of a year. You help us launch it and whatever. Then we'll talk about more work after that. So it was a 2.5 week job to get their token launched, to get it tradable, get it set up on their site so people could, deposit it into the game to get like game rewards and things like that. And when we launched it, when we were planning on launching it, the original plan was for the total token value to be about $1 million. So, I said, okay, let's launch it at 1 cent with 100 million tokens. So, if you take all 100 million tokens by 1 cent, the game's worth $1 million. That seems reasonable. It's sort of a made up number anyway. And we were all ready to go to launch that when somebody reached out to us, and said like, hey, I'm really excited about this. I think the game looks cool and I want to invest in it, but I want to put in 100K. And so if you launch this at $1 million, there just isn't going to be enough for me to buy. So can you launch it at a higher value? and, and this guy DM'd me about it on Discord. I didn't really know him. We talked a bit, but he was pseudonymous. And I was just like, holy shit, that's a lot of money to throw into this game that isn't launched yet. It has very little, but it was crypto. That was just what people did. And I talked to the founder of the game about it, and he was like, yeah, a few people have messaged me the same thing. Like, what should we do? And so we ended up launching it at $10 million instead of $1 million. We just 10x'd everything. And so my 1% of the token supply was now like $100,000.
Sure.
And then the day we launch it, it takes off. It shoots up to $1.50, which is now it's $150 million game. We're like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? And then it, crashes back down and it settles around $50 million. And so what I thought was going to be a $10,000 payment turned into a $100,000 payment. And then it was a $500,000 payment. And that was all in the span of like 5 days or something,
Oh my God.
which was just this insane head trip and was this huge validation for that theory I had had that the most valuable thing I could do is learn how to do this coding and work with these teams and help them launch their
Yeah,
tokens and their NFTs and whatever.
provide a skill or value instead of just speculating on others, right? There would
Totally.
always be money in that, especially when there's a shortage of talent.
Yeah.
Um,
And it was also this just like, oh, thank God I didn't get paid in normal money. I
right,
mean,
right,
like that storyline could have gone so differently,
sure,
right? Where I just got paid the $10,000 that I asked for, and that was the end of it.
yeah.
Because those tokens ended up being like most of the money that I made in the crypto period.
Was there any restriction around what you could do as far as selling them or holding them, or companies a lot of times when they give you stock, you got to vest, right? Like, was there
Yeah.
anything like that?
So they gave me 10% of them up front, and then the other 90% were vested over a year. So we set it up in a smart contract where we put it was 1 million tokens. And so we put the 900,000 tokens into a smart contract that unlocked basically by the second. So
Okay.
every second I could go and I could claim however many tokens had been unlocked based on that 1 year schedule.
Got it.
So it was something like 2,700 tokens a day. So even when the token was at 50 cents, I was suddenly making 1,300 bucks a day. I mean,
Sure.
that was insane, right? And then eventually at the peak, the token's trading at $13. So now I'm making, and I negotiated more payment for recurring services. So now it was more like 3,500 tokens a day. And then I had deposited a bunch of them back into the game to compound my earnings, of course. And so it got up to like 4,500 tokens a day. And now suddenly I'm making like 56, $57,000 a day at the very peak, but all in this game's tokens, right? So then it's a question of how much do you sell them? How much do you exchange them for other things? And there was never any discussion at the beginning about what I could and couldn't do with my tokens, right? It was
Right.
like, this is your payment, do with them what you want. But eventually the number that I was getting and what that number was worth was so much money that if I sold my whole share every day,
You're
it
going to
would
move the whole
cause
price. Yeah.
exactly, I would move the market and you would see
Yeah.
like a big drop in the price of the token if I sold a large chunk of them. And I had them send all the tokens to my personal wallet that was literally Nat Eliason.eth.
So
And
they're going to know
so
who moved it and that he was the guy that programmed the code.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And so that turned into a whole huge issue too, because now I'm stuck in a situation of I can't just hold these game tokens because they're worth nothing as game tokens. Like I have to sell them to get some of this money out. But if I sell too much of them, the community gets pissed, the founders get pissed. And there were a number of people who were so angry at me for selling my tokens that they were trying to get me fired from the project because they were like, this guy's not invested. He's, just taking advantage of it. He's milking it. And it's like, I was still programming this whole time. Like I was literally building the game, while I was still selling the tokens. And then, the founders are getting mad at me and I'm telling them like, I'm going to keep doing this. And like, you also need me to keep working on this. So you better get over it.
Right.
And it really turned kind of nasty pretty quickly, unfortunately.
How did it end?
Well, the the token hit that peak and it dropped quite a bit from there. I mean, at the peak it was worth $13. Now it's worth a cent or half of a cent, right? So I mean, it's gone basically back to nothing. And I kept working on it through most of that period, really until the big Terra Luna blow up the following May, so May 2022, because that was what precipitated the whole market crashing. Terra Luna, it was a $70 billion blow up over the course of like 3 or 4 days. And then tons of people had borrowed against those tokens. And so there was this massive cascading liquidation through the market that wiped out tons and tons of people. Everyone started pulling money out of the market. The token dropped really, really quickly. And I had sold a decent amount along the way, but I had also locked up, I had locked up like 250,000 tokens in the game to compound my earnings that I couldn't take out because they were stuck in there. So like I couldn't sell those. I could only sell so many per day because of the market. So I left tons of them on the table. And as the market crashed, it became pretty clear that since I was writing like the token code and doing the like crypto finance stuff for the game, they just didn't need me to do anything anymore. And I was also just so burned out by I mean, like you don't think about it when you deploy something like this because it just felt like, oh, this is a fun project, right? Like launching a token. But then at the peak, there was over $100 million in the farm for the game for people trying to farm the token to like, double down, sell it, whatever. And that was all code that I had written. The token was worth this insane amount. I had all this insane money on the line. And I was losing sleep over it. I was like freaking out because every day I could have woken up and somebody could have figured out how to hack the game. And somebody did figure out how to hack the contracts where all that money is. And that's sort of where the book opens. Um, and so I'm living with that like sword dangling over my head. There's all of these people in the community of the game that I actually cared a lot about and really enjoyed working on, like coming after me and trying to like get me fired or, get the founders to like get rid of me. I'm getting more tense with the founders because, they don't like that I'm selling tokens, but they also like that I'm working on the game and stuff. And so it kind of hit this point where I, we had like they didn't fire me and I didn't quit, but we just kind of like
Time to go. Yeah.
quietly went our separate ways. Yeah. Um, and they eventually ended up just stopping working on the game entirely, and now it's just a dead project,
Because
sadly.
of the price valuation decline, they just decided not to throw more resources at it.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing with crypto is when a token has a huge run like that and a huge drop, it basically never comes back.
Yeah.
Like that really only happens with Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, the big guys. When crypto comes back, maybe 2025, 26, whatever, people aren't going to invest in the games from last cycle. They're going to invest in the new
The new
things.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the founders were stuck in this, like I empathize with the situation they were in, which was it feels wrong to abandon this thing that people have put a lot of money into, but we also just can't keep working on it because nobody's going to want to like speculate on this or be a part of it. It makes a lot more sense to launch a new game, try again, try to do it better this time, and then be there for when the next mania takes off. Because like crypto, crypto shouldn't be just gambling and just speculation, but speculation does get people in the door to try these products. And as long as you have a legitimately good product behind it, and they were earnestly trying to build like a really fun game, as long as you have a good product behind it, I think it's not the worst thing to use like the fun speculative gambling side to at least get people curious about what you're building.
Did you get into this thing? And I do not mean this with any level of judgment. I'm just more
No, no.
curious where, okay, you're getting into programming, you want to stay in the world. You're actually thinking like, hey, I've got a kid coming soon. It makes sense for me to find some stability while still being in this industry that I'm super interested in. It's very exciting, right? And it moves very quick. And then someone says like, yes, can you do the engineering, the programming for this game? Yeah, sounds fine. It's a project,
Yeah.
right? It's not your game, it's their game. You're a hired hand essentially at that point, and they're going to pay you pretty well to do that. Potentially well. I mean, you've got risk in there. When it gets to where it's $100 million, when it gets to where you're like going on in chat rooms or whatever, and people are pissed at you for selling it, they lost their life savings or whatever. Like, does that stuff just? I mean, what did that feel like? Because I'm sure there's people that it I mean, it's full of like risk takers, right? And there's a
Yeah.
lot of very sort of retail dumb money investors that are just chasing and throwing money in that they don't have. And even though you went about it, again, I mean, no judgment in this at all because
No,
you
no,
were
you can
just
judge
working
me.
on a no. I'm just saying like
Yeah.
you were working on a project.
Yeah.
It wasn't moral or immoral. It was just a project, right? It was just code.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's like, oh, the code I've written is now in the hands of people that are, I'm not even talking about the game founders. Is now these speculative investors are in there and they're blowing their life savings or they're doing whatever. Which, hey, if it wasn't this one, it probably would have been the next. But I don't know. Like, what was that like emotionally?
Yeah, it was really hard. And I started to feel guilty about talking about crypto stuff
Right.
because again, when I started programming, when I started writing about crypto, like I was nobody. And I mean, I had a following from my internet marketing work and my blogging and stuff, but I was nobody in the crypto world. And there was no reason to expect that I knew what I was talking about. But as the year went on and as the game got popular and as the token price went up, and as I was writing more about crypto stuff and people were reading more of my articles, it got to a point where if I talked about a project, like people would go put money into it.
Right.
And the problem that I realized was that let's say that I find out about a project that's really interesting on day one and I put a bunch of money into it. I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it until, say, day 30 or day 45, at which point I'm probably up a good amount. It feels like it's been de-risked. And so now I feel comfortable talking about it. The problem was by the time I felt comfortable sharing it,
It
a
was
lot
old
of
news.
that, it was old news.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I would talk about something And that would almost be like the top signal. That would be the sign that you should get out, but people would see me talking about it. And so then they would rush into it. And it happened a few times. And I realized like, I can't talk about this stuff anymore. Like I can be interested in it and I can, talk about it privately, but I shouldn't be writing these public articles about these things that I'm excited about because people are losing a lot of money by me talking about it. Um, and the same thing happened with the game, unfortunately. Like we launched the token and the token was at 50 cents and I was tweeting about it and writing about it on my blog and stuff. And I was super excited. And, nobody from outside crypto land put money into it. But then they see it get up to $5, $7, $8, and they're like, oh shit, Nat was right. Like, I better get into this. But like they were the exit liquidity.
Right.
And, I never meant to do that, but it just kind of like started to happen. And then, yeah, like you said, I started to feel pretty bad about it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize it wasn't like an intentional thing. It was just a consequence of not talking about things until I was comfortable. And then other people needing to wait until they're comfortable before they go in. And by then it was just like way too late.
Right.
And the same thing with the game, it was on the one hand, it was hard to be like yeah, I want everybody who invested to do well. I don't like that me selling means the price goes down and that you might not be able to do as well. But also like one, I can't not sell.
Yeah.
Right, like I can't not sell off these tokens
Yeah.
because the odds are that it is going to go to zero. And I talked to other people after people who read the book who worked in crypto, and there were a lot of people who had similar stories to me who never sold anything. And so they saw their net worth go up to millions of dollars and then go all the way back down because they felt that same social pressure to not sell any tokens from the thing that they were involved in. And
Right.
so they didn't because they were so afraid of the community backlash. And then they just never made any money off of these things that they worked on.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel fair either.
No, and in reality, they never made any money because they never had a realized gain.
Exactly.
I mean, all
Yeah.
they had was a sugar rush, essentially. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
was just,
And there were all of these speculators, right? These really rich investors, these like Three Arrows Capital type people who were pumping money into the game to run it up and then so they could like dump on people who are coming in after, the real sharks in the industry. And to me, I was like, why are you attacking the people working on the game who are making money and not attacking the like speculators who are purely trying to get rich off of it,
right.
right? Like they're the ones you should be more annoyed with, not the people who are like actually in here trying to make this thing valuable.
Totally.
But it was just sort of the nature of the industry. I think it's like there was always and often still is some sense that, and it's true with a speculative asset, you only make money by finding a greater fool to some extent. And if that mentality is sort of steeped in you and you think that anybody who doesn't have diamond hands, who doesn't hold on to it no matter what, is your enemy, then you're going to lash out against them.
Right.
And that's why, to your point at the beginning of the conversation around like, what am I buying? What am I investing in? Right. Like, if this thing doesn't have cash flows, if there's not something the token is that you're getting paid for holding the token or the stock, then it's like, yeah, that is sort of the only way you make money, and it's going to naturally create animosity among people.
Totally. And, I mean, it's that way even with stock and even some of the same stuff that you talked about. I mean, CEOs have to disclose when they're selling. The market always
Yeah.
sees it as a bad thing. I mean, the difference is there's earnings and it's a much smaller percentage, right? They're not driving the price quite as much. But I mean, Warren Buffett liquidated half of his Apple stock this week and it hit him hard, like so.
Yeah.
And it hit the overall markets hard. I think it contributed to what was going on. I around the same time frame, like 20, yeah, 20, yeah, mainly for me, maybe a little before 2020, like mid 2020. The Leaders Lab is actually a talent acquisition company, mainly for leaders, right? So my
Cool.
main business is we place leaders in jobs. As you can imagine, 2020 was not our best fiscal year ever, right? Like it just
Yeah.
stopped. And so much like you, I was like, what do I do with this extra time? I've always been interested in the stock market. I've done a little bit of day and swing trading before. Let me just like kind of double down and get in here. And I did pretty well. But what I really noticed for me was it was a 24/7 job. And these weren't even assets that could trade 24/7. I was
Yeah.
just more
Yeah.
curious in like, what are the stock futures doing? How are we going to open up tomorrow? Because I'm holding, options that are expiring, or I've got a swing trade or whatever. And it was, I did fine. Like on paper, I did fine. Like as a percentage, I did fine. As dollars for my time, I did not do
Mm.
fine. Other than
Yeah.
I just had no other way to make money anyway. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I did something. But I also noticed I was never present anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a good, I didn't even do it for a full year. There was a good like 9 months of my life where if I was with other people, my wife, I remember my in-laws visiting one time from Phoenix. We're out in New York and they visited, and I was like, how am I going to take the day off tomorrow? Like to drive them out to, we were going to go out to the Hampton or out to, yeah, somewhere on Long Island. And I was like, how am I going to do that? Like I got a lot of trades
Mm.
going on right now and I'm going to have
Hmm.
to like sneak away and I'm going to have to like make that happen. I like to, like these things can't sit another day. Right. And I just remember being out with them and trying to put on a good face, but like just constantly like moving money on my phone and getting pissed off
Yeah.
because my cell phone signal wasn't there. How did this affect you personally and being like a new dad? And talk to me about that. Like how, where did this affect you? Yeah. And how has it affected you now in like your relationship with money and all of that? I know I think I sandwiched four questions in there, but
No,
answer
no. I
me.
mean, a lot of the same way you describe it. It was a 24/7 market. You could always be trading, and the information market was moving even faster and was more essential to have a pulse on. And so it really was just like you described, all consuming, getting annoyed at anything that interrupted the ability to like be connected to that stream of information because if you missed a tip on something launching soon, you know that you might miss out on a lot of money, or you if you miss a tip on somebody maybe going to sell a ton, then you know that that wouldn't go well for you either. There was one project that I was pretty heavily invested in. I ended up having to cut this story from the book too, but where the biggest holder told his group of friends that he was like he was out skiing. He's like, when I get back from this ski thing, I'm just gonna sell all 10 million of my tokens in one chunk. So it's gonna destroy the market. So you should like get out now before I'm done skiing.
Wow.
And one of those friends forwarded that message to me. And they were like, I know that you're in this too. Like you need to get out now, right? And you know, thankfully I was by my computer and I was able to get out and it was okay. But that was the kind of stuff that you had to be ready for.
Totally.
And it was yeah, just not present with anyone. Didn't really want to hang out with people who weren't also deeply into crypto. And there was this constant thing that would happen during that period where my wife and I would hang out with, you know, a couple friends and stuff, and the guys would just immediately peel off and start talking about crypto stuff. And, you know, all of the partners would just be like kind of annoyed about it, right? And because that was just like all that we were interested in at the time.
Right.
And yeah, it created a lot of tension in my wife and I's relationship too, because, you know, I was never totally present. I was always on my phone looking at price charts and stuff. And, you know, she had just started working in real estate. And this was 2021 in Austin. And so she was actually almost as locked into the chaos as I was. It was just a completely different chaos. And so we were just like ships passing in the night, never being able to interact that closely until our daughter was born. And it was, you know, we look back on it, we feel pretty bad because it feels like we just don't really remember any of those first few months between, I mean, one, that's common with a newborn, right? You're like not really sleeping, you're in that sort of fugue state, you're
Sure.
figuring everything out, renegotiating responsibilities, but we're doing all of that on top of both of us being locked into these crazy work worlds and trying to like fit having a newborn into that. And because she was self-employed in real estate, I was self-employed. There was no maternity or paternity leave. You know, there was no break. So it was like, you know, baby was born and we were both working again like the next day. I mean, I'm
Right.
pretty sure I was like checking price charts in the birthing center, right? I mean, it was
Sure.
just constant. Um, and yeah, it's a tough thing to look back at and be okay with it. And neither of us are okay with it looking back. And so it's been a really big priority for us now with work to make sure that it doesn't get that all consuming. And for her, it's been, it's manifested in helpful ways like, setting better boundaries with clients and like, managing a lot of that. It's also just been helpful that we may never see another real estate market quite like 2021 in Austin. I mean, that was just
Sure.
a special time period. But for me, it's like leaving that mania, leaving the crypto world and just focusing on writing. And that's pretty much the main thing that I'm focused on now. It's nice that you burn out after a few hours. You can't
Yeah.
really do 12 hours a day of writing.
Right.
I mean, maybe you can if you're one of a select few people. I can't do that anyway. Um, and so, yeah, it has been helpful to be like, okay, I want a career that is naturally balancing the way writing can be. And almost the thing that I'd be afraid of is something taking off and getting super attractive and super appealing. Like say crypto comes back in a year and Crypto Confidential is like selling like crazy and all these teams want me to advise them or, tons of media people reaching out or whatnot. Like I think I know now that I'll be able to say no to a lot of that because I just value the time and presence so much more,
Right.
having seen how bad it can be if I like let the work get all consuming as it was.
Makes sense. I mean, you know what price you're paying at this point, so it's
Yeah.
like easier to put in boundaries. Whereas back then it was like, who cares if the baby needs my attention? This email could make us $115,000.
Totally.
Which one's more important? That I change a diaper, then make 115,000? I mean, like you said, when you're making great money, there's always like a way to justify it, right?
Yeah.
The thing that our brains never do when we're trying to justify it because it doesn't work is, well, you've also looked at shit like this and lost that kind of money before too,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Has, has it changed your and I know we got to wrap up here, but has it? I think about almost like being in a casino in a way and going, I'm a $5 chip guy. I'm a five. Ooh, I think I'll try $10. I got
Hmm.
$10, and I start winning, and then 10 turns into a double down, and like pretty soon you're playing with $100 chips, and it's really hard to go back to $5 chips when you're playing with $100 chips.
Yeah.
Has this experience, you think, damaged like your relationship with money, or do you think you've? I mean, how are you feeling with that?
It's I think it's actually really helped it in a couple of ways. One, after the market crashed in May of 22 and I decided to work on this book, I told myself that I wouldn't take on any other jobs or any other work. Like I just wanted to focus on writing. And so I had my advance from the book, but it's not like a crazy amount of money, certainly significantly less, more than an order of magnitude less than what I was making in crypto. And that was basically the only money I made for the year and a half after 22. And so to go from making the most money in my life to making the least really makes you reprioritize like what matters.
Right.
And really made me, cut a lot of just like bloat that had happened in my life. The lifestyle creep like expanded really quickly. And it really made me respect money a lot more because when it was just coming in like crazy, I had no respect for it. I was like, yeah, fuck it. We'll go to the Gucci store. We'll buy new shoes. Like, who cares?
Sure.
Right. Like, it's just coming in like crazy. And then, it goes away and you go, oh, like, it's actually really nice having like savings and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
And I feel like assuming something else takes off for me in the future, I'm just going to have such a different relationship with it because I'll know what it's like now to go from feeling euphoric and on top of the world and like you're never going to have to work again to realizing like, oh no, I was very wrong.
Right.
And now I have to like cut tons of expenses and stuff in my life because I'm not making that kind of money anymore. And I prepared well, but not as well as I could have. And all of the regret and stuff that comes with that. Um, and it also made me just respect like the money from work more too, along the lines of like not looking for the next thing that can give me a really quick, fast, big win, like I was doing with a lot of the entrepreneurship stuff before, and just focusing instead on, okay, what's something that I could just fully commit to for 20 or 30 years and is probably not going to make that much money right away. And it's going to be really hard. But if I stick with it and let it compound, can turn into that like financial life that I want in a much more like durable and fulfilling
Yeah.
and lasting way.
Sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sustainable. It's balanced. It has guardrails. You can raise your kids. You can do all that. Yeah. So
exactly.
it's been awesome. Well, great job with the book.
Thank
It's
you.
called Crypto Confidential. Everybody check it out. We'll put a link here in the show notes. I'd love to see it in a movie, man. I was telling you that before
I hope
we
so.
came on.
Yeah,
So, guys, go out and buy it, and then maybe someone will make it into a movie, and you can say, "I read that book.
that would be,
I
yeah,
heard that guy on
that
Ken's
would be so
podcast."
cool.
Awesome, man. Great to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.